I'm Vin.
I'm Sori.
And we are about to do some old school Metallica.
Finally.
Old school
what
Metallica.
What is it that everybody keeps talking about?
80s Metallica. Creeping Death. This is from the Ride the Lightning record. So I'm pretty excited to introduce Sori to some old school Metallica. And keep Unforgiven 2 in your head. Okay? And then keep this in your head and realize that the same band that did Unforgiven 2 is the band that we're about to listen to.
Okay.
And you will be able to see why I reacted the way that I did and why a ton of Metallica fans from back in the day were like, ugh.
Alright.
Okay, so this is Creeping Death from Metallica!
Alright. I remember hearing friends do that part.
There's a Christian song that like completely stole this riff. Remember we were hanging out and I was like, oh, that's Metallica. And they're like, no, it's so-and-so.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember? And I'm like, no, that's Metallica. They're like, no. Lots of Christian bands. I love it. I just played the opening to Creeping Death. You got quiet. Thou shalt not steal.
Exactly.
Thief himself.
Come up with your own stuff.
Sound like Egypt?
Yeah, it does. You're right.
What? That is
Okay, that's
Metallica!
different than Countryalica.
That is metal. That's Creeping Death.
Yeah,
It's a classic. It's a classic. What did you think?
Well, I think that I see like that they did good work. It's just not my thing.
What?
Yes, I'm serious.
Are you serious?
Completely
Did you
serious.
see like the Mediterranean like scales?
Yeah, I
Did you
mean-
feel like you were in Egypt?
No, when you pointed it out to me, you know what happened? I think I'm like just a Tool person.
Oh my god.
I know that you're sad about that, but the thing is, I don't feel it inside me. This one, I'm like, okay, all right. I'm sorry, but he still likes it, so you guys can be happy, you know. It's just, I don't know.
This is an embarrassment.
Like I can see that instrumentally they did an incredible job, and the topic of the song is very interesting. I don't even know how you could interpret it if you didn't have some Christian background or
Jewish
background, really.
You'd be Jewish.
Right. That's why I said or, and I was about to say.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Sorry.
Unbelievable. Didn't you see the
Yeah. I just didn't feel it, and you know I have to feel the song. I couldn't feel it. I was like, okay.
What were you feeling?
Huh? Meh. I was like, oh, that's.
To a classic Metallica song. ladies
But you
and
told me
gentlemen.
the other one, the first one that we listened to, was it Unforgiven 1?
Yeah.
You said that was a classic.
It
and I
was.
was like, meh. I think I'm just not a Metallica person.
You're just not a heavy.
Can you still love me?
Awesome.
or-
It's debatable. I don't know. Okay. Did you see the solo? What about the solo? No.
I thought that, no, I'm saying that they did a good job, but it just didn't inspire me.
Well, what's the song gonna inspire you to do? Go to Egypt and be the death angel? I mean,
No, just to like move. I kind of just sat here like.
this is a ridiculously amazing song. All right. Lyrically.
Okay, very interesting topic. Very interesting how he. Why would the Christian people take this song that already is has such a clear message to it and then jack it for themselves?
Well, you know what Christians do. That's what they do. So that's a very good point, right? Like, so there's you take an opening signature riff from a band, but because it's not a Christian band, because it's under the moniker of Metallica, they're gonna take it and do something else with it. When he just basically told a Bible story.
Yeah.
But that's
In like a lot of detail too.
Yeah, well,
I was
probably.
like, man, we didn't miss anything.
Probably in more detail. There's probably stuff in here that the band that stole this riff doesn't even know about. Like Goshen, what's that? That's probably some devil thing. You know what Goshen is?
No, I didn't.
Allah Akbar.
I was like, I'm gonna have to ask the Vin. Goshen.
Oh my goodness.
Was Goshen where the Hebrews were living?
Very good.
Okay, I knew. I totally
Very
knew the whole
good.
time.
Very good. Goshen is okay. So this is obviously from the Book of Exodus. This is a story of Pharaoh and let my people go and the angel of death and all that.
Yep.
And the Hebrews were living in this place called Goshen because prior to the Exodus story or narrative, the book of Genesis ends with this kid Joseph. He's a Hebrew. He gets sold into slavery. He lives in Egypt. Here's a spoiler. He gets elevated to second in command to Pharaoh. And then there's this big famine. So Joseph brings his family, the other Hebrews, into the land. And Pharaoh says, you can live anywhere you want. And so Joseph sets up his family to live in this area of Egypt called Goshen. And then
a new Pharaoh takes over.
And the new Pharaoh
doesn't know Joseph, doesn't know what he's done, doesn't care about his family, and then probably realizes, look how many of them there are. If they rise up against us, they'll take us over. So they said, all right, forget about it. You know what? We're going to make them our slaves. We're going to work them so hard they won't even think about fighting against us. So they all went into slavery.
Yeah, so there's a ton of very interesting history in regard to this. There were a group called the Hyksos, Hyksos, in Egypt at the time that basically overthrew the Egyptian pharaoh, at least on the south side of Egypt. And so,
yes, that's right. I remember we talked about that.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like that period was very, very interesting because basically the Hyksos overthrew Pharaoh and then left and went and established their own thing. Which, if you trace the Exodus, it's this group of people who were foreigners, right? Who basically had their own leader and left Egypt, and left Egypt in ruins. And so there's a lot of parallels. There's also this interesting place in Egypt that archaeologists found called Avaris. And in Avaris, you have these tombs, and the person, and then there's this one tomb where the person is buried who does not look like an Egyptian. And he actually looks like a Canaanite or a Hebrew, which would go along with the story of there is this foreigner who rose to power that was well respected by the Egyptians but lived in a segregated land. So that's the land of Goshen. It's really, really interesting stuff, historically speaking, in regard to the Exodus. Because so what happened prior to the Exodus is you had Joseph. He lives. The Hebrews set up in the land of Goshen, and then a new emperor or new pharaoh takes over and goes, screw these guys, we're going to enslave them in hard labor. So that's why the term Goshen was important. Like that's a very minute detail in the story, and Hetfield knew it, but most Christians probably wouldn't even. I'm amazed. I was reading an interview with Nergal, #Visit the Village.
Come on.
And he was talking about how he reads the Bible a lot. And so these guys know more Bible than your average Christian. And it's very, very, very interesting. So when I was a kid, this was kind of one of my favorite stories, the whole Exodus story. Moses is one of my favorite characters. So what did you think when you saw the lyrics?
Well, I actually didn't see even a single thing in there that was incorrect. It seemed like everything he had right. I don't know if I missed something, but I was very surprised. The accuracy. Well, no. I mean, I don't know.
What?
I was going to say, because he's called the Destroyer. So I don't know if the Death Angel would actually be called the Destroyer or not.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But he was destroying.
He was destroying the life of the of Pharaoh.
When Pharaoh
when
Pharaoh had them enslaved, he started realizing that they were multiplying at such a rapid rate that he was like, they're soon going to overtake us. So he would tell the midwives that when they birth their children, if they're boys, kill them. Throw them in the Nile, right?
Throw them in the Nile.
So lots of them died at the hands of the Egyptians.
The boys basically functioned as an offering to the Nile god, basically. You just chuck them in the Nile and all that. And it's interesting because, like, when it talks about darkness 3 days long, so the main deity that was worshipped by the Egyptians was
sun god
was
Ra.
the sun, right?
His name was Ra.
Ra, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Pharaoh was supposed to be an incarnation of the sun god. So
right.
A lot of these plagues were basically like God, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, saying, "I'm stronger than you."
Right.
So like, you worship the sun. Well, if I decide that the sun is not gonna
shine,
it's not gonna shine,
yeah.
right? And even the death of Pharaoh's firstborn was a theological statement, because what it was saying was Pharaoh was basically the image of God on the earth, and then his son, after he died, was going to be the image of God on the earth. And so the idea is, well, if you're that powerful, how come you couldn't stop your son from dying? Did you ever have a problem, though, with God taking out the firstborn of Egypt? Did that ever bother you?
Kind of, only because I felt like, well, the kid didn't have anything to do with it, and the kid is... But I was a child at the time, so I was thinking, well, why are you going to punish the kid, not realizing that that was judgment on the father, not the child. But still, I mean, yeah, it's I don't like it. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, why don't you strike that guy with leprosy or something? You know?
Strike the Pharaoh with leprosy.
Yeah, strike him with leprosy. Let the child live, you know? But...
Yeah. I think those were one of the I was listening to a talk one time, and the guy was basically saying he didn't believe the Exodus story because it makes God out to be a racist, because, you know, he's choosing the Hebrew people over the Egyptian people, and he didn't love the Egyptian people. He only loved the Hebrew people, which of course is not true, because what's interesting is, and he says it right there. Born, I shall soon be there. So, like, I'm going after your firstborn. I creep the steps and floor, final darkness. So he's talking from the perspective of this destroyer, this death angel. But then he says, blood, lamb's blood painted on the door, I shall pass. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't about, are you Hebrew, are you Egyptian? It was about, do you have the blood on your door or not?
Right.
And so there is a way of escape if you have the blood on your door. What's interesting, what I'm sure Hetfield doesn't know, that if you look at Exodus chapter 12, it says that as the Hebrews were leaving, that a mixed multitude went with them.
Right.
So that basically, by the time all these other plagues happened, everybody around in the surrounding area, because Egypt was kind of functioning like America at that time, because there were tons of people that were coming in, and so you had all types of, you know, geographies that were located in Egypt as far as ethnicities go, and a lot of those folks were enslaved. Mm-hmm. And so when these guys saw all the other plagues, they're like, yo, let's hook up with this guy and follow Yahweh.
Yeah.
And so they left with a bunch of Egyptians and other people together.
It's crazy too, because the city was where you got your security from, because that's where you had, you know, your medical stuff, you had your trade, all the things that you needed were in the city, and they were leaving the city to go out into the wilderness. So they must have had like a pretty large trust in this newfound God Yahweh, because they were leaving all their security behind to go out into the middle of nowhere to follow this God that they had just come to know. Yeah. But they saw all these powerful acts happening in Egypt, and since Egypt was looked at as such like this big, amazing, strong place, and they were getting struck down by Yahweh, okay, Yahweh must be better than Pharaoh, must be better than the sun god. I mean, he silenced
at minimum he's stronger.
Yeah, silenced the sun god for 3 days, so it's like, okay, well.
Yeah. At minimum, they're thinking, okay, Yahweh's stronger, we should follow him, right?
Can you pass me the Red Bull? I'm very tired. The other thing is, you know how it talks about the water becoming red?
Yeah.
Blood. Turned to blood.
Yeah.
The Nile became blood.
Yeah.
You hear like a lot of people wanting to naturalize that and say, okay, well, it's because I've heard the mud,
clay sediments.
the clay sediments, and I've also heard that it was because like the fish were dying, and So what do you have to say about that?
Well, there's a ton of like really interesting things on YouTube that talk about like chain reactions. So like the plague of the flies and the frogs and all that.
Yeah,
and
yes.
So there are basically naturalistic explanations for why you had these plagues.
Yeah, I think I heard like the locust came in so thick that it like covered the sun, and that's why it was dark. And
well, yeah, and that would then result in killing the cattle and the hail and things like that. I saw something on YouTube. It's pretty interesting where like the guy starts with the hail, and then the hail did this, it killed the cattle, and then because of that, it had the bugs, and the bugs ate this, and then because of that, the fish died, and so basically that there were naturalistic explanations for why.
That's what I'm talking about. For
why the plagues happened. And I don't necessarily, and it's the same thing with the Hyksos thing that I talked about earlier, of the Egyptian history records these group of people who were not native Egyptians, who really basically fucked up the land of Egypt and then basically were expelled. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or there's a theory that Pharaoh Akhenaten was actually Moses.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because Akhenaten became a monotheist, and he didn't hold to their traditional.
Which he believes in one god, not a polytheist who believes in many gods.
Right. Well, yeah. The original the Egyptians were basically henotheists who believed that there was like a main god, and then there were sub gods under him, kind of like Zeus on Mount Olympus.
Oh, so different
and
than
he's
a
got all these.
polytheist?
Yeah,
Because
polytheist.
it believes in a bunch of gods, but not that there's a head one.
Right, but a
okay.
henotheist believes that there are other gods, but that there's a main god.
Okay.
Which I'm actually kind of a henotheist, but that's a different story. I bet you didn't know that. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that period was extremely interesting, and it's not as simplistic as just saying, "Oh, this is a story of fairy tales and blah blah blah."
Yeah.
There's some pretty, when you look up Avaris, look up the Hyksos, look at the naturalistic explanations. They're very interesting. And I to be honest with you, I don't know where the line is between, this was just a naturalistic explanation, and they put theological interpretations around these naturalistic explanations, right?
Okay.
In other words, let's say that I forgot what it was, and I'll try to find it on YouTube and pin it to this thing. But basically, a group of asteroids hit, and you mess with this, and it messed with the pH in the water, and that's why you saw blood and all this, and the with the fish, and the Nile turned to blood. And then when that happened, all the frogs would leave.
Yeah, but that doesn't explain how all of a sudden Pharaoh would say, "Oh, okay, wait a minute, I'll do it, so make it all stop." Well, the Nile's not just going to go back like that, right?
No, I agree with you. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle somewhere. Like, I don't have a problem with saying that there are naturalistic explanations if you're saying that God pulled those levers, because it's...
Well, it was like that song we were talking about where he said gravity was making it so that way they
Yeah. The dance, the pirouetting, comets or whatever that Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying when we were talking about the what do you call it? Exist by Avenged Sevenfold.
Exist, yeah, that's what it is, yep.
Yeah, but if you really look at the details in the Bible, it generally never says that God went abracadabra and did some sort of miracle. There's, especially in the Old Testament, there's always some like naturalistic explanation there. Like, for example, when he parted the Red Sea,
yeah,
it said that God sent an east wind, right? So, like, if you really look at the details, it's very little to do with like abracadabra. Right? There's a naturalistic explanation for what happens. Even with the flood, it says that the channels of the deep, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It doesn't just say God said blah, and then there was a flood. He uses nature.
Means. Yeah.
So what ends up happening is if you come from a perspective of unbelief, you're going to go, oh, look at this abracadabra stuff.
Right.
But and then if you come from a perspective of belief, there's a lot of Christians who are afraid of talking about the naturalistic side of.
Oh yeah, I had completely written all that off. I'm like, no, that's not what happened.
Yeah, yeah, and I think God wrote the rules of nature, and so.
No, you're right.
If God wrote the rules of nature, He can kind of manipulate it to do
but we
what He
spend
wants.
so much time fighting over. It was natural. No, it was supernatural. It's not. Maybe if it is somewhere in the middle.
That's
Can
what
you
I'm
imagine?
saying. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I agree with you.
Right?
I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah. And if Moses was Akhenaten, and if the Hebrews really were and the Hyksos, basically they were like a confederation of these other ethnicities in Egypt at the time, I think down south.
Yeah.
So when the Egyptians are writing their history, they're not going to say the Hebrew God kicked the crap out of us and all this.
Right. Well,
They're just gonna talk about it on the political level and say we expelled them.
Right.
Instead of so we whoever wins the wars writes the history, right?
Well,
so.
that's because didn't they always do that? Because they always wanted their legacy to be like the highest, the best one, and stuff like that.
Well,
we're now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. We still kind of do it now.
We do that. It's human nature. Whoever wins a war writes a history, right? So it's like I mean, come on. Like 100 years from now, we're going to talk about the Iraq War, and we're going to say that Saddam Hussein was this like horrible person who was like really oppressing us, and we took care of business and we took him out and all this. Yeah, I think it's a little bit different now because we've got video and things like that gets archived,
Right.
and it's
Right.
it's impossible to lie about this stuff now.
Right.
But historians. Just like any discipline, that's why I love it when people say, "Well, scientists say," like they're these objective computers who have no biases whatsoever, right? But yeah, I think there's enough there historically to kind of piece things together, even from a naturalistic perspective, and say, okay, something happened in Egypt with some group of people where the Egyptians didn't want them in their land anymore. And so it's an eminently fascinating thing. There's this guy, I forgot what his name was, but he's convinced that Joseph wasn't Avaris and that Moses was Akhenaten, and like he introduced this new sort of monotheistic, way of looking at things. Of course, if you really look at the Hebrew Bible looks very much closer to henotheism than.
Oh, really?
Of course. Well, the divine
council.
council.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yahweh sits in the council.
Yeah, I think that's
gods.
why I wasn't so surprised when you said that. Like, I've never heard you say it like that.
That I was a henotheist?
Yeah, but then when you said it, I was like, meh, okay. I can actually.
Yeah.
I like it when we can argue about something, but I think I kind of agree with you.
Yeah, it's an extremely fascinating story, and of course the lamb's blood, painted at the door, and that's a determining marker of whether or not you get in. Now, what's interesting is...
Okay, that part always bothered me when I was a kid.
So that part bothered you?
More than the child dying. Yes.
The kids getting killed doesn't bother you, but
I didn't like the fact that the reason that God was going to go over somebody was because there was blood. Like, blood? Why is blood what's making you decide not to go in there?
Yeah.
Like, that was like, couldn't have been a flower attached to the doorpost or something.
Well, you put a little do not disturb.
Yeah, flip it.
Do not disturb.
Right.
We're disposed.
Like, why blood? Why did it have to be blood?
Yeah, and I think so one of the reasons that I believe the Bible is true, even when we talk about naturalism versus supernaturalism, is that
I know exactly where you're going.
There are like 3 or 4 themes that get developed and really like expanded. You know how I love story arcing. The Bible is insane with its story arcing and with its subtleties and its subliminal nature. So it's one of those things where death is coming for you, but if lamb's blood is there, death will pass over you. Yeah, so Passover is this very important, probably the most important Jewish, festival or holiday, and it marks the time when the angel of death or the destroyer passed over because he saw blood.
Right.
And so this there's this theme of, oh shit, everybody's in trouble. Because a lot of people misinterpret the Exodus story. They make it sound like all the Hebrews, they've been oppressed, they've been this, they've been that, and Yahweh is just the Hebrew version of Baal. It's just the Hebrew God. Mm-hmm. So in those days, your nationalism and your theology were literally one and the same. So like if you were a Canaanite, you were going to worship Molech, and Molech basically functioned like your flag. Your God basically functioned like your flag. So they were one and the same. So, and your God always was on your side racially when there was a war. Like there was no objectivity. There was no, and obviously that means that your God is just really just the collective extension of your country. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting and what's unique about the Hebrew God and the Hebrew Bible is that if a Hebrew person would have not had blood on their doorpost, their kid would have been killed as well as the Egyptian.
Right.
And so there's some sort of message that says everybody is kind of in the same position, even though the Egyptians were the oppressors, and even though the Hebrews were the oppressed. God doesn't say, you guys are going to completely get a pass on virtue of being a Hebrew, and you guys are going to get killed by virtue of being Egyptian because of all the shit that you did. God made it so that everything came down to whether or not you had the blood or not.
Yeah.
That's it. It has nothing to do with your race. Which, whatever you want to say about God killing, as far as an ancient Near Eastern document, that is particularly unique. Because if it was just a regular ancient Near Eastern document, it would have been, oh yeah, you Hebrews, you guys are good no matter what you do, and you Egyptians, I'm going to wreck shop. Mm-hmm. Like that's what you find in the normal A&E documentation, is that the God was decidedly very, very patriotic for some reason.
Okay.
But here, you don't find that. What you find is God saying, okay, I'm going to fight for the oppressed, but I'm going to make blood the demarcating factor. Mm-hmm. Which, of course, that imagery was picked up by Christians. All the Behemoth fans were coming after me because I said that Satanism was a derivative religion.
Yeah.
And they said, well, Christianity was derived from Judaism.
Yes.
Yes.
It was.
We agree.
Wholeheartedly.
Wholeheartedly. The difference is we don't make songs against Judaism and say, forget the Jewish God, when we know very well we're dependent on Judaism. That's the difference. You see the point. But yeah, the Christians picked up on this, right? And they said that, the animal sacrifices were a prefigurement of Jesus. Mm. And so it doesn't matter what your race is, as long as you're covered by Jesus, you're covered by the blood of Jesus, God's anger is going to pass over you.
Right.
So if you're an oppressive, evil, horrible, rotten, disgusting, terrible person, there's hope for you. And if you are an oppressed person, there's hope for you.
Right.
But you've got to recognize, and we kind of talked about this before, you've got to kind of own your own junk.
Right.
And realize that you need help and you need a savior just like everybody else does. And I think, like Jordan Peterson talked about this with identity politics, I think there's a big lesson here about identity politics. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I do.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I was just thinking when you said Jordan Peterson, I was like, we should tell them that we might, go through it. What was that book?
12 Rules for Living.
Yeah, that we might do something on that. So my mind kind of went on that. I was like, we have to tell them we might do that. Is anybody interested in us, like, kind of breaking down the chapters on that? And
let us know.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Okay, so anyway.
But how do you think this relates to identity politics?
Wait, I got sidetracked. Go ahead, go.
Well, I was just saying that, identity politics in our day is like basically you have an oppressive class and then you've got a oppressed class. Mm. And so the oppressed class all get together and like completely demonize the perceived, oppressor class and make them feel terrible. Right? And call them a basket of deplorables and all the rest of it. And they completely victimize themselves and take no responsibility for any of their actions. It's like this collective groupthink. And then the oppressor class, which is supposedly, straight white males, they go, well, screw all of you guys. We're going to fight back. And hence we have Donald Trump, right? Mm-hmm. And so God's solution to the whole Egypt thing was very interesting because God's solution was, okay, both of you in your own way suck.
Right.
And in order to create a new humanity, we've got to find a unifying grounding factor, which was the blood. And then from there, you guys are going to go out together, and you guys have to figure it out together. Mm-hmm. And so you had a mixed multitude who were went out together, right? And all of them were basically on the same level because if it wasn't for the blood, they would have experienced a death. Right? So
right. Well, and then that would kind of, because they had to be leveled out, because if you had like the Israelites would probably have like anger issues toward their oppressors,
right?
And then the oppressors would kind of feel like they were above the Israelites because they always had been, right. But now, okay, everybody's leveled out. We only survived this because of the blood, and that's the only reason we're all walking out of here hand in hand with what we have.
Right. And I think there's a lesson there for all of us, and of course, this is where Christianity has gone so wrong in so many ways. Like, we talk to people almost every day that say if we're not religious, then they get persecuted. Like our friend from Brazil, or
there was one from Poland too.
From Poland, yeah. And my friend that was talking to me a couple hours ago, Jack Dillon, when he's talking about like being, persecuted, because so a lot of Christians aren't looking at it like, hey guys, we're all on the same level and we're trying to create like this new culture.
Right.
Let's create some new culture together. Right. Which is what we're trying to do in the village, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're all trying to like come out of whatever and create a new culture. So I thought it was really.
And I love that we have like a space like that, because we get a lot of comments of people that have been suicidal, that are still very, very heavily depressed, or go through bouts of depression, or have experienced tons of loss in their life, or just very lonely. Or they're an atheist and they've been so pounded by religious people. They've had a bad experience in church. There's so many experiences that all of us have had, and we've experienced, our own things as well. So it's like, I love being able to tell people, like, go to the village. Like, there's more of us like that. Like, you're not alone. Like, we're there, all of us together. So,
And we were intentional in calling it the village because, like, a village is a small, is a small place, or sort of prehistoric place where
more simple.
Prior to when when we had all this technology that really functioned to to advance humanity, but also separate humanity.
I know whenever we talk about the village, I always picture, I'm kind of weird, I always picture we all have bare feet and like we're running around in our little clothes and like we have clothes, but they're just like more, they're not so advanced, you know, they're just kind of more simple. And somebody's cooking on a fire over there and we're all going to get together in the middle and we're going to talk later, which is these discussions that we have. So. And
the podcast, so you got the Satanist guy and the atheist guy and the agnostic guy and the Christian and the Catholic and the theistic Satanist and the Gnostic Satanist, and they're all sitting there around the campfire, and the great thing is nobody ends up dead, which is great.
Right.
So it's such a very, very interesting song, and that you could talk about for days, that Christians hijacked.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the band. There's some no-name band that's going to go in the trash heap anyway. But, so it's a very interesting song.
Scroll down. One part I thought was interesting a little bit further. It says, so let it be written, so let it be done. I'm sent here by the chosen one. So I thought that was interesting because usually it's the Pharaoh that said, or somebody, when the Pharaoh says something, what he says, let it be written, let it be done. Because what he says is like set in stone, but this person flipped it. I don't know who the writer is. Sorry, guys.
James Hetfield.
Okay, James Hetfield. He flips it and he said it makes it sound like that the death angel was sent by someone else. That their word is let it be written, let it be done, and that's why the death angel was there. Yeah. So I just thought everything was so the accuracy. Was there any mistakes according, like if you say, okay, does this not match the biblical account? I thought that it was dead on.
Nope. It's. I'm sure what you did there. No, I mean that's pretty much the Exodus story. But I thought the musicianship was brilliant because they had all these like Egyptian, it sounded like ancient. I will say that like this could have been used in Sunday school and stuff. You know what I'm saying? But we're like, oh, you can't. Oh. Yeah. Oh, metal! It's the devil music. I mean, can you imagine like how like experiences would be like different if we had stuff like this? There has been. I'm just amazed by the themes and the awareness that so many of these different bands have had. Yeah, we get our hands on stuff and we just make it very corny. It's so true. You really do. It's so true. I remember like hitting like a point. So we like started listening to like Christian music at I don't know when I was like 12, 13, something like that. You were finally allowed to? Yeah. I had like, allowed to listen to Christian music. I had a little like tape recorder and I would like record by the radio so I could listen to it later. And I remember like starting to show my friends songs that I liked. And then they were like, eh. And then when I started kind of hearing more of what was out there, I was like, oh my gosh, like the Christian music, I like always made sure my windows were rolled up in my car. Because it's so corny. And it always got to the corniest points when I was stopped at a light. And I always felt like I was always prideful, you know? So I always felt like people were like everybody was like, what is this corny ass music? That's me, the Christian. So I started like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put on my other tunes. Yeah, but the good Christian metal now that's out, like... They didn't have that back then, and even if they did, I wouldn't have been able to listen to it. Yeah, we did August Burns Red last night. Yeah, there was none of that. There's even Christian black metal. I heard there's a guy that tore up a satanic Bible at a show. Like the opposite. Yeah. I think, all the really good Christian bands came up listening to this stuff. You're probably right. They didn't come up listening to, DC Talk and all that shit. They were listening to fucking Metallica and rocking out with everybody else. Oh, man. Yeah. Yep. Oh, good night. All right. You don't get to be very proficient in guitaring. Okay, we're doing it again. We're almost at 45 minutes. All right. We love you guys. We love you guys, but it's too long. Too long. All right, so what do you give this song? Well, I was giving it a 7. I'm going to give it an 8 because we talked about it and the accuracy was good, and I really think that it's good. I just didn't feel it like inside me. Maybe if I listen to it again, I don't know. But some other songs. This is a classic song. I feel Tool. Right off the bat. Yeah, we're not going to do Tool for another 8 months. Well, you're not going to. I'm gonna do one on. I'm gonna do my own review. I'm gonna be like, guys, it's Tool time. All right. So you give it an 8?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it. What are you giving it? A 10, 11, 14?
I'll give it an 8.
Oh, you're giving it an 8?
Yeah. I think it's a classic song. I think it's important.
Oh, okay.
But it's not, you know.
It's not what? I mean, you made it sound like it was.
Well, no, it's just refreshing to hear like real Metallica.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm one of those fans that I'm a pre-Black Album Metallicaist.
What did you give Unforgiven 3?
Unforgiven 3, I gave, didn't I give it a 7.5?
Did you give a 9 to any of those?
I think I gave Unforgiven 1 a 9. I'm not going to talk about this. It's an 8. Okay.
Very surprising.
Vin out.
Sorry out.
Oh, we have the Underground show is going to be interesting tonight because they're probably a main stage band, but they're going to be on the Underground show tonight. So that's very interesting.
But at least we're getting them in.
All right. Vin out.
Sorry out.
Gone.